Alright guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be telling you why you should participate in Ludum Dare. So, I'm going to be doing a talking videos time. I won't be moving this arm too much because of this. A few days ago, it's now Wednesday, and on Saturday I had a little mishap at the motocross track. Maybe I looped out the jump a little bit too much. Maybe I hit a bump or something, I'm not sure, but the result was 5 broken ribs on that side and a double fracture collarbone. So moving it is slightly painful. Doesn't stop me from doing a video though. So let's talk about Ludum Dare and why you should be participating in it. So Ludum Dare is an event that started in April 2002. And it's running, nowadays it's running every 6 months, so twice a year, but it used to run 3 times a year. And it's an event where people all over the world, everyone gets together to make a game over a weekend. So there are 2 parts to Ludum Dare. Either you can go in as a jam, and then you have 72 hours to make a game, and you can be a team, and you can also use different assets that are already there. But you can also take part of the compo version, the competition, and for that you have to make everything from scratch, and you have 48 hours as a solo individual to do everything. But you are allowed to use a game engine, so that's a benefit, so you could argue it's not really from scratch. But all content-wise, you have to come up with a game idea, you have to come up with all the coding, the graphics, sound effects, putting the entire game together. All of that is up to you. So, and you've got 48 hours to do it. I really like the compo version because it pushes you to the max to get everything done in such a short period of time. When I heard about Ludum Dare the first time, I thought, what's the point? So you're going to stress yourself out for a weekend, 48 hours. You'll probably make a crap game to begin with. Like, whatever graphics you could put together. Why bother? Why not just use that time instead and invest in the game that you're making? Why don't you just put the additional 48 hours into there? That's how I was thinking before I started this whole Ludum Dare event, and I thought I'd give it a one try. Okay, I'll give it one shot. It did interest me quite a bit because I saw people getting quite excited. On my Twitter feed, people were saying, oh god, come on everyone, it's time for Ludum Dare, let's give it a go, everyone join in. And I thought, okay, well, it seems to be quite a friendly community, so I want to be part of that, I thought. So for Ludum Dare 36, back a few years ago, I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a go. And I came in quite unprepared. I hadn't trained my skills or anything, and I thought, well, I've been making games on and off as a hobby for, 20 years? So how hard can it be? I'll just put all my skills together that I've tried to acquire over the years and then see what I get. Yeah, I should be able to put something together. So if you don't know, Ludum Dare has a theme every time, and basically everyone that participates in Ludum Dare gets to submit a number of themes, suggestions, and then there's a vote that goes on and on. And just as the Ludum Dare event begins, then the theme is revealed, and you get to find out just as the start of your 48 hours hit, then you get to find out what the theme is, and then you have to make a game based on that theme. Let's see now, the theme for Ludum Dare 36 was ancient technology. That's what it was. So the game I ended up making was called Ancient Tech to Return. And basically I started to make a 3D guy in Blender, and I put a skeleton in him, and I started to rig him and skin him and make him be able to move. And then I created a simple platform, and I guess my imagination didn't really take me that far, but I ended up making a game where basically you had to walk around this platform, and then you had to look in different chests, and when you opened a chest, then you'd find an ancient piece of technology, and you could bring that item to a path, and at the path there was a guard that was waiting there, and he would tell you if you brought the right type of gift for him to open, or so he would step aside. And then if you didn't have the right gift, he'll give you a little speech bubble of what type of technology he wanted to be given, if it was like a bar of metal, or a tool from that period of time, or a sword or a weapon of some sort, so ancient type of technology. And he'd tell you what he wanted, and then you'd have to go around again and find the chest. Whatever you had in your hand, you put in the chest, and whatever was in the chest you got in your hand, and then you walked off. And then you had to pass 3 guards, and that was basically the game. And it wasn't that much fun, to be honest. It was quite rubbish. I mean, you couldn't really fail unless you fell off their side, and I guess you could do it as fast as possible. That was the whole goal, to try to beat your previous time. But the game itself probably wasn't that much fun, but it's still, I managed to submit it in time. And it got quite decent feedback, and people thought it looked quite nice for the limited period of time. And people thought, they started to give me quite a few suggestions on what could have been made better and what was maybe not so good. And that really sparked an interest for me to I thought, oh my God, this is like a whole community now giving me a lot of feedback. And a few of the things that I really learned the first time around that I did Ludum Dare was, first of all, when you have a playable prototype and you think, oh, well, this is pretty much a game now, I can just package this and submit it. It's so far away from being a real game that you really start to learn not to underestimate. So, like I had the playable prototype, I could walk around with my character, but then, okay, I needed an inventory system, and I needed to be able to have little animations playing, and I had to be able to have the inventory switch items back and forth, and then I have to have some game logic. Then when I reached to the guard, he had to interact. I had to have the animations match up. I had to have him be able to say what he needed when I challenged him. Things started to add up, and as I put the game together, taking it from that very simple playable prototype where I just walked around with a character thinking, oh, this is quite nice, to tying it together into a game, that took a lot longer than I anticipated. Not only do you have the game logic and the main loop now running, then you also have to have everything matching up so with the game states. So let's say you complete the game or you fail the game. Well, then things need to reset. You need to start the level, load it up again. All the characters need to reset to their original positions. Maybe you just overload the scene, or maybe you try to restore everything manually. So all of that also took a lot longer than so hours ticked away. Just, okay, I need to be able to restore the level. I need to reset the score counters. I need to reset the inventory. I need to reset all the timers, and I need to transition back and forth to menu systems. And so that's when the time starts adding up. And here's something that's so useful with Ludum Dare, is because you're forced to make the game, then you're gonna have to cut it short. So you can't spend too much time polishing a feature. You just have to go, oh, I'm gonna move on now to the next thing, and the next, and the next. And this is where it becomes super valuable, because when you start cutting those things out and you start moving forward, pushing yourself forward, that's when you realize how much more there is to making your game than you originally thought there would be. If you manage to submit the game at the end of that weekend, you've created the game, you play tested it, you've created levels, maybe audio, music, you've put the menu system together, you've play tested it, and then you started to make levels, and you probably found out that you didn't have enough time to make levels, and you definitely didn't have time to fine-tune the gameplay enough. All of these things, you push yourself through one weekend to do this, and then you know, okay, that game that I'm making now, that I've been spending maybe half a year making, or maybe I've spent weeks making it, or even a year or 2 years, then you can put into perspective, okay, how much do I really have left on that game that I'm making? So maybe you're still in that part where you're making the playable prototype and you've got a main level going, and then you realize, oh my God, I've got to tie together the whole game concept. I've got to trim, I've got to fine tune the systems, I've got to make it fun, I have to make sure it's all the level transitions work. I have to make sure that it ramps up in difficulties at the right rate, so the player maintains interest. And I think that's probably one of the key things to take away from Ludum Dare, is to put the whole thing into perspective, what it entails to make a game from start to finish. And I thought, I'm not really going to participate in any more Ludum Dare events now. I think that was my one try, but little did I know that I was going to be hooked now. And I've now ran another 8 or is it 9 even consecutive Ludum Dare since then, and I don't seem to be able to stop them now anyway. A few months passed by and Ludum Dare 37 came along. The theme for that one was one room, and I made a game. I learned some lessons now, so I practiced my tool skills a little bit. I spent some more time in Blender before I got started. I practiced the animation and the skeleton and the rigging and things like that, and the modeling. And I practiced a little bit more in Unity, and this time around I made a little, it's basically like an infinite runner, and with it being one room, I decided to make a conveyor belt with a little astronaut that had to jump over boxes that came. So he had to try to stay alive and not get pushed off the ramp or the conveyor belt out into space, and by jumping and avoiding these type of blocks then. So I thought I've learned from the previous event that things take time, not to do things overly complex, try to make something that was fun to play, that looked visually pleasing, and I also tried to involve my kids a little bit more, so I did a lot of play testing with my kids, and I thought it was quite funny, bumping into the different bugs and things like that came along. Key takeaways from that was that routine, this was the second time I made it. It helped me along the way. I knew what to expect pretty much. I started to have time slots for what I needed to do. So I knew that I could start by making the core gameplay. I had the graphics quite early on. And then I knew that by day 2, I should have pretty much the core mechanic working and start tying into the game states and things like that. And then I could spend maybe the last 6 hours, I started to add music and sound effects and making sure that I had enough time to test. A few things other that I learned was that the WebGL version had some problems with fonts, for example, and it took a long time to compile to WebGL. WebGL versions are really important for Ludum Dare because a lot of people that play your games and rate them after the event, they just want to have a quick and easy way to get into your game. They don't really want to download a distributable. So if you have a WebGL version, that's a huge benefit. People will much more likely to playtest your game and rate it if you have a WebGL version. For Ludum Dare 38, I didn't have much time. That was coinciding with my wife's birthday. A small world, I think the theme was. And pretty much I hadn't spent much time at all doing any game. So the whole first day I spent with my wife, we had the birthday cake and things like that. And by the second day, I just thought I'll put together a little simple game to keep the consecutiveness going with it being the third event. So I ended up putting together a little planetary defense type of game where you had a planet that consisted of a lot of small cubes. I wanted the cube look for some reason rather than spheres. And it was basically a mass that attracted all the cubes into the center of this planet. And then that mass was attracting all the little cubes and forming a planet. And then you had asteroids that were coming. And then basically you had a little tower defense or a little missile defense type of system that you could fire off, and it would detonate the missiles and deflect the asteroids. And you could deflect the asteroids to divert them from hitting your planet. But if they did smack into your planet, then it would basically decimate the cubes, and they would break off away from gravity, and they'd send parts of your planets flying into space then. So that was the game concept. And funny enough, I spent less time making it. It didn't really look that great. It looked terrible and boring. So it didn't really attract a lot of players. But I think playability and fun-wise, it was probably the more fun than the other two games anyway. I spent quite a lot of time myself trying to play it and trying to beat my own score. And I thought it was quite nifty to try to time these explosions to deflect the asteroids. So I learned about that one that the feedback said that people thought it was quite fun. So I learned that maybe I didn't have to spend so much time on the graphics part to try to show off or try to beat myself all the time. Maybe I should use this time more to make interesting games and focus a little bit more on the gameplay. So that was a few of the key takeaways from that game. Ludum Dare 39 came along, and for this one I thought, okay, I'm going to try. I know I'm a family father. I take pride in spending time with my kids and doing things with them. And then I also thought that, what if I should treat this one as just like maybe as if I was away for a weekend on a business trip or something. So I thought, okay, if I'm in the house, my kids will find me and I want to interact with them. That would be fun. But I really wanted to push myself one time to see how, if I really poured everything into this, what could I really do in 48 hours? So what I did is I have a sound room in my garage that I built that I record sound effects in. In that garage, I thought, okay, I'm going to sneak in there. I'm going to tell the kids basically that I'm working, which I essentially am because I work with developing games. It's my spare time hobby turned business. So I thought, okay, I took my computer and everything and I put it in the sound room. So I had all these elaborate plans about making a platformer, not so innovative by any means, but I really wanted to push myself graphically, and I had practiced my Blender skills again. About 6 hours later, so that would be 9 o'clock in the morning, my kids found out that I was in the garage. I don't know how. I thought I'd try to elude them for that amount of time, and then they thought it was hilarious to come in and out into the sound room because I was sitting there. So they were even more interested this time than they had ever been before. So they ran in and out, in and out, in and out. And I showed them what I was doing, and it was a lot of fun. The whole idea of focusing on the game solely was totally out the window. What I did take away from that one is that it really started to solidify my ability to create low poly art and also the rigging process and the skinning and animation. And by repeating that every now and then, it really helps me to remember those things. So when I get back into Blender now, I get up and running quite fast. And it also got me started with this low poly look that I've had going for a while since then. And I'm really happy about that one. So those are some of the key takeaways that I have from Ludum Dare 39 with robot power. For Ludum Dare 40 that came along after that, I ended up making a game called Robby and Coppy. And now when I think about it, the theme would have been somewhere along the line of, yeah, the more you have, the worse it is, or something like that. So again, lack of imagination. I started to push forward and making a game. Maybe I didn't spend enough time thinking about an innovative game, but I ended up making another platformer. So again, not so innovative, but this time I wanted to practice my 2D art instead of, so I made a 2D platformer instead. And I had practiced a little bit in Illustrator to do 2D broken. Basically, it's like 2D characters drawn slightly from the side. And then I break the objects into separate head, arms, legs, torso, and feet, and things like that. And then I can animate them in Unity, so they start running basically by animating, similar to the way you do it with bones anyway. And I animated those type of characters for the platformer then. And it was called Robby and Coppy because basically you were a thief, and a bank had exploded as you put too much explosive when you try to burst open the vault. So all the coins and the money got scattered along the level, and you had the robber had a bag on his back, and as you ran and jumped the platforms, you started to collect coins, and then the bag would start growing more and more, and essentially became heavier and heavier. So you had to you ran slower and you couldn't jump as far. So the more you had of the money, the greedier you are, I guess, the slower you would be, and the more tricky it would be to complete the level. So the idea was that you'd have to balance the amount of coins that you'd collect and try to maximize that, but still make it to the end of the level. And to prevent you, there were a number of donut munching police officers with trigger happy pistols that were patrolling the levels, and if they spotted you, they started to fire your gun and munch their donuts. So that they were trying to prevent you. And this game, I was quite happy with it. I learned a tremendous amount about the 2D platformer and about the controls and level design. But then some people got frustrated that the characteristics of the player changed over time as well. So a lot of valuable feedback here about the control, about level progression, about how it made you feel as a player. Maybe it was sort of fun, but it wasn't fun because it slowed you down and it made you feel a bit awkward and stuff like that. And I could repeat the whole game state I'd really solidified by now, so I knew exactly how much time it would take me to start making basically the game states from a menu screen into gameplay to load level to resetting characters when you were to restart the level and everything like that. I sort of knew exactly how long I would need, and also I had about 3 hours set aside for music and pushed myself through making that and putting everything together. After that, the next game was Ludum Dare 41, and the theme for Ludum Dare 41 was 2 incompatible game genres. And that's basically taking 2 game genres that don't really belong together and you combine them and make a game. And I thought that one was quite fun, and I decided to make a game called Golf and Grenades, and it combined traditional golf game with where you have to fight off oncoming enemies, maybe like a zombie slaughter game. And they would basically run towards you or walk towards you and make creepy sounds and then throw themselves at you. And if they touched you, it was game over. And then you had to hit the ball and try to get into the hole. And I made nine distinct holes or levels to play. And I focused a lot on the low poly art and the animations and things like that. So overall, I was really pleased with the way the game looked. Super thrilled about it. It had some bugs in it that I couldn't iron out in time, and the people thought it looked nice, but they had some playability issues with the aiming and things like that. But most of all, I think I was very much too overambitious with what I tried to achieve. I wanted to create all the 9 holes with the different graphics, a lot of different graphics and things like that. So what I learned from this one was 2 things. This in particular, I was too ambitious. and I didn't focus on the fun of the game. And the second thing is that I didn't value my social life enough. This was a disaster because, again, it was a year had passed since the one where I spent a little time on a game with Planetary Remains, making a small game since my wife had her birthday. And for this one, we had agreed that we're going to celebrate the birthday later. And I was going to focus on this game, but I really poured everything that I had into making this golf and grenades, and I basically blanked everything out. The key takeaway thing there is that it's not worth. Ludum Dare is fun. It should be fun, but it shouldn't take the upper hand or overhand if you've got something more important to do. And Ludum Dare 42 came along, and for this theme it was running out of space. And funny enough, I was running out of time really, because I was on a holiday with my family in Gotland. So I knew that I wasn't probably going to make a game at all. I thought this was going to be the first Ludum Dare that I would miss. And on the ferry, I thought I'll borrow my kids' pen and paper a little bit, and I started to make something. And I thought, so running out of space, parking spaces was something that came into mind. And I drew a little parking space with cars parking and trying to figure out how long they would stay, and one would leave and someone else would have to come in and take its place. And I played with the idea that you had different times that they needed to stay, so you need to optimize your parking. And when I came home, I only had 8 hours to really make it a game, so I threw together some really basic low poly art cars, and then I just made a super basic games where you basically had the cars coming and you could move them left and right and push them into a slot, and then you had a timer ticking up, and if that timer reached 0, the car would take off, and then you'd have 2 rows of parking slots. So if you parked one that stayed for 10 seconds in one slot, and then you tried to park one behind it with a shorter duration, maybe 5 seconds, then after 5 seconds that car would collide into the one in front because it was staying longer. So you had to time based on your horizontal axis. You had to put the cars quite intelligently, and there were some bypass lanes as well that you could send cars through all together. And then you had some cars that were longer. I think I had some lorries and trucks and things like that. And funny enough, that game, I think I spent 8 hours making it. I launched it away, and that's by far the best scoring game that I've had so far. I think it placed 4 in theme, 4th, and then I had some top 20s, I think, and really good feedback. So I was thrilled about that one. A bit baffled since I spent so little time, but I was super thrilled with the result. And that game I actually spent some time after making into an Android playable version as well, that I launched on the Play Store, but I never really promoted, unfortunately. Spent a lot of time, maybe 2 weeks or something like that, full time, effective, maybe so 80 hours to up all the graphics and adding a lot of content to it, and adding some new type of levels and sound effects and things, explosion effects. And then I created that game, uploaded it, and I learned how to publish things on the Play Store with that game. That was a valuable lesson, and I learned how to implement in-app purchase as well. I thought it was quite fun to play myself, but I haven't promoted it, so I don't know if it's really worth. It's not making any money really, but fair enough. Maybe someone will find it and find some fun. But from a learning perspective, it's really good. It was very useful or good experience on that. And then Ludum Dare 43 came along, and lo and behold, I amazed everyone by making another platformer game. So my innovation scores are down the drain, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. Theme was sacrifices must be made. And for this time, I thought, okay, I'll have a platformer and you're a Viking. And then you have to run and collect items like wood and crops, wheat and things like that. And then you collect those things, and by the time you'd reach the end of a milestone or a rune stone you reach to on the level, and then you sacrifice that amount of crops that you had collected. And that would basically unlock a new path in your level to allow you to proceed. And to make things a little bit more challenging, I had basically Thor's lightning. It was a thundercloud on the left of the screen, and it moved along and it shot lightning down, and it added some rain to make the atmosphere a bit dark and scary. And it fired lightning bolts down with Thor's hammer that started to destroy the level. So if you were too slow, or you didn't time your collections or your priorities correctly, then the lightnings would destroy the level and you would fail that way. So you were pushed to move forward. It was like sort of a deadline or a timeline that pushed you along. So one key takeaway here that I had was that I learned a lot of things about level progression, and I also understood now that people for Ludum Dare, they're going to make a judgment about the game in a very short amount of time. They're going to start playing your game, and if they don't understand straight away what you're doing, you know, if it's not self-explanatory, or if you don't teach them how to play it, they're not going to play it. They're going to just go, okay, what's this? I'll try another game instead. So I really took emphasis on trying to make it very clear what the objectives were with some text and also some instructions, and making it super simple to play, not overcomplicate things. And I also wanted to keep the play time to be that you should complete the level in about 10 minutes. That was my goal. And the level being the full game, because people don't really spend much more time in a Ludum Dare game than that unless it's something extraordinarily fun. And I also was very pleased with the graphics that I put together, and the music and everything fit really well. So I was super pleased with this game. And the fun thing about this one is that I had just watched a thing about speedrun competitions from Super Mario, and I was amazed that someone would go to such lengths to complete Super Mario in the optimal amount of time, even based on the number of frames and using all the glitches and bugs in the game. Then I thought, I'm going to make a speedrun competition for my game. I launched the speedrun competition where I offered, I think, $50 to the winner, and $25 to the runner-up, and $10, I think, to the third place. And then basically people would have to put YouTube videos together of them playing the game and trying to beat the fastest time possible, and they could utilize all the bugs that were there. And this was really an effective way to start finding bugs, and it was really fun to follow this progress. And people started to commit hundreds of rounds of play and probably hours and hours of gameplay to try to beat this game, and it was a lot of fun. And I saw the frustration in some people's faces when they played. It was hilarious to see them go, "Oh my god, I failed on this stupid spiky log again," because I put some really annoying spiking logs at the end of the level. So my best time, I think I achieved was 3 minutes 26, and people started to find all the weirdest type of bugs where you could basically kill your character before he did a little ceremony when he reached the runestone, and by killing him, they stopped the counter and it restarted, and you could utilize that to gain an advantage and save a few seconds here. And then they started to be able to double jump certain distances, and they could find a collection reset error that I didn't reset the number of crops in a certain death type scene. So basically they could play and gather a lot of resources, kill themselves, restart the game, and then have all the resources collected. So I think the final game, what was it, 50 seconds or something, 55 seconds or something, someone completed the game in with all these type of glitches and bugs. So just recently we had Ludum Dare 44, and I made a game called Blood Money. The theme was your life is currency, and yet another time it was my wife's birthday. They tend to always come in April. I had arranged everything this time. We went out for a lovely meal. We spent the night out in town. We went to a hotel. We spent time with the kids and had a lot of fun. I was again prepared to totally fail this time around, but then on this Sunday I did have 12 hours to put in, and I thought, okay, I'll see what I can make. And I put together basically like a shoot 'em up bullet mayhem or type of thing, or bullet hell game, but without bullets. It was more my bullets shooting than anyone else's. So I recently created a video about modular spaceships that you can look up, and I used that technique to really quickly make spaceships that look quite fairly decent from a top-down view, and they're modular, so I could implement them breaking down as you shot upon them. So I made a top-down shooter or shoot-'em-up game where you controlled a little starship, and then you could just blast targets. And as they died, they would either drop additional life for you to pick up, or they could drop power-ups. But the power-ups, if you collected those, then it would deduct life, so the power-ups would cost life. And I managed to get the balance fairly good. I did overpower a little bit, so if you're too skilled, you'll run into some crazy stuff going on screen where you're basically blasting everything sky high. learned a lot of things there. I'd already implemented something I had a lot of feedback through all my Ludum Dare events, was that control usually felt sluggish, and I usually left the damper things in Unity where you'd basically press left or right and it'd start accelerating an object and then decelerating it. I just removed that sluggishness and had direct feedback, because when you make a game, you might initially think it feels a bit sluggish or weird, but you'll quickly get used to that. And as you get used to that feeling, that'll go away for you. But for anyone new coming into playing your game, they won't have that sort of knowledge about it, and they'll just get frustrated instead. So try to think extra carefully about how you control your player, especially if it's a platformer or a shoot 'em up type of game. It's very fast to prototype a game, but making it into a complete game takes a lot longer than you probably ever anticipated, and you'll definitely learn that by participating in Ludum Dare. So that's lesson number one, a key lesson. Second thing is that you get a really good perspective of the entire process of making a game. Again, not just the prototype part, the fun part, but everything about the game states, unloading objects, loading them up again, resetting counters, resetting inventories, having level progression, designing levels, all of that. You get the full picture. It's extremely valuable, and you get that within just a weekend. Another key thing is that don't assume that people will figure out or know. You have to tell them or show them how to play the game. They're not just going to probably figure it out. Show or tell them how to play the game. Another thing is that it's easy to make a game too hard, especially. You spend a lot of time yourself making the game, iterating over it, back and forth. And you think, oh, this is too easy, I'll ramp up the difficulty a little bit. And then you play and test it a little bit more, and you ramp up the difficulties because it's too easy. And then when someone else tries your game for the first time, they'll go, oh, I can't play this. This is ridiculous. So another key takeaway is that making a fun game is really hard. Making it look pretty might be fairly easy, but making it fun and innovative is super difficult. And that's something you learn. The themes are there to push you into creative, innovative games. So something I haven't learned enough is that I shouldn't be making platformers and things like that. Should just throw those out the window and come up with entirely new processes. So I'm still learning. I'm going to hopefully not make another platformer in the future. So innovation and making a game fun, aim for that. Definitely worth learning. Motivation. Participating in Ludum Dare it creates a massive amount of motivation to make a game. You'll push yourself through the process. You'll see a lot of other people going through the process of making games, and you'll be motivated to complete the whole game. You'll be motivated to get the release date and start getting the feedback. So motivation is super good for you to learn. You don't learn motivation. It's going to be super useful for you to experience motivation. Second thing is inspiration. A lot of other people are doing this the same weekend as you. There's about 2,000 to 3,000, I think, people now that participate every time. And just seeing their feeds, their streams, their forum posts, their blog posts and things like that, it just fills you with inspiration. And people come up with all sorts of crazy things, and it'll really inspire you to do things. And it's going to be a lot of fun to be part of it as well. And then we have innovation. By having these different themes, it'll force you, hopefully, again, don't fall into my pitfall of doing platformers mostly, or things like that, or shoot 'em ups. But try to be innovative and try to combine different thoughts and some new aspects of different type of game genres into something new. So really push for that one if you can. It'll also help you take in your game from just having a game loop, and it'll push you, especially if you haven't made many games before, or if you're into a really ambitious project. Ludum Dare will show you what's beyond the game loop process. Again, the game states, the transitioning, offloading, unloading, loading into memory, out of memory, high score systems, you name it. Another thing it'll help you with is practicing your tools. If you participate, especially repetitive or multiple times in Ludum Dare, you'll be using your tools, and every time you repeat this process, you'll become a little bit better at that tool. And whether it's Unity or another game engine, or Blender in my case, or Photoshop, or Cubase for making music, or sound effects, you use your tools and you repeat the process over and over again, and you do the game states over and over again, and you become really good at this. You're going to be able to create simple games and fast games this way. What you also learn is that ranking is not important. Whether you finish first or 10th or 100th, it doesn't really matter. What is important is the feedback that you get on your game, and also the rating that you get. People can rate the games up and down, basically with between 1 to 5. So try to focus a little bit more on where you're rating higher, not ranking, but rating higher and lower, and try to listen to that type of feedback. It's quite easy for people to game the system. They could basically have 20 or 30 friends coming in and voting 5 stars and everything. It's their loss if they did it, if your game was good, or, on the feedback that it received. You go to ldjam.com, you create an account, and then you look at all the instructions that are on the website, and you start to prepare yourself for the next event. If you look on YouTube or in the blog system on ldjam.com, you can find time lapses and post-mortems of people's lessons learned and things like that. And then as you get closer to the actual event, start engaging more into look at Twitter and follow the hashtag for ldjam and practice your tools. If you're using a game engine, maybe Photoshop, sound programs, or Blender in my case, start practicing those skills a little bit. Do the import, export, update all your software and things like that, and you're good to go. It should be a lot of fun to participate in your first Ludum Dare, and then I think there's a high probability of you being hooked and continuing to participate. It's such a great event and a lot of fun. If you're interested to find out more about how to prepare for Ludum Dare maybe, or how to prep your tools or things like that, or if you have any questions, maybe how you record your time lapses or things like that, give me a shout in the comments below, and I'll be happy to answer your questions, or even create some additional videos on this topic if you find it interesting. So again, thanks a lot for sticking with me in this video. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up and hit the subscribe. And now I'm realizing that I'm nearly cross-eyed because of the medicine I've been taking. I'm speaking too much, I'm not drinking enough, and my collarbone is really hurting. So I'm gonna stop speaking now.